if you look at M&A deals, the vast majority fail to live up to what was promised and what was pitched. Do you know what that number is?
You can check every consulting firm. It's a range that's usually 70 to 90%. I would challenge it a bit because the question behind that is, what's the definition of failure?
Mm.
And did we anticipate on capturing 100 million value and we captured 99.999 and that's a failure? What does that mean? And usually when I talk to a number of these companies, we've intended to capture X amount of value in a year, and it took us longer. I mean, that's ultimately what it meant. It's not that the deal blew up and it was a failure, all the people quit, all the value was lost. No. And this happens. We get deal fever, we get optimistic, you get the rosy glasses on. Yeah. And your financial model reflects that, because that's how you build a business case to get the deal done.
Yeah.
You got to paint a great picture, and every great financial analyst out there knows how to make a chart that goes up and to the right. I think my kids know how to make a chart that goes up and to the right.
Yeah.
You fundamentally know how to do that, and you get buy-in. That's a little bit of the challenge, is that becomes sort of the main thing, and the rest gets a little bit lost there.
Yeah. I want to switch gears. I'm very curious to learn more about M&A Science and the product lines you've built up, and also saving our listeners like a pitch on your company. I mean, it is fascinating. I encourage people to check it out. But how about building it? You talked about some trials and tribulations with your tech team initially and building software. And as a small entrepreneur, small business, I think that is a challenge even when you grow so many companies, of finding the right tech talent who speak a language which most management teams don't. What did you learn there, and how have you been able to overcome that? Because it looks sharp now.
Yeah, it's people I feel like fundamentally it applies whether it's tech or anything, marketing, sales, HR. It's really comes down to the people. Are you getting the talent that performs well, but also the cultural components and how well they work with you and your style of working?
Mm-hmm.
I struggle a lot with this in the early days. I think there's this inherent nature to hire people that you like, but also that have similar traits that you do. And I was guilty of this in the early days. I often did this where I hired people that are very similar to myself, and I'd end up with a shit show of a team that had a bunch of ideas, that had a lot of energy, but didn't get anything done. And today I'm fortunate to have a team of, I would classify as type A managers that are very different personalities, very detail oriented, very conscious about their time management. They get things done. They may not come up with the most creative ideas and things like that, but they know how to execute really, really well. So now I find myself in today's time hiring people that are very different than myself, but I can identify with as having skills that would be very complementary to what mine are.
And what about specifically working with technology people who are writing code? And what's that process? And then how do you manage and measure success there? And really asking, I want to know the details of how you do this. Do you do it in sprints? Do you do it? How are you able to ensure that you're going in the right direction and that a bunch of useless code isn't being written?
That's so hard. I remember I would product manage, and when I finally got a CTO in, and he showed me why I'm not good at doing that. It is tough. If you can get in and just it's tough because you really got to make sure you're working with the right group. And I feel like you don't know what you don't know in the beginning.
Oh yeah.
So if you can somehow come over that and either find a way to network with other entrepreneurs that may be a little bit ahead of where you're currently at, that would help. That would help to see if there's some ideas you can get to validate. There's things that I didn't realize when I structured the early team. They were skilled at prototyping, but they weren't skilled at writing code for scale.
Right. Very different.
And it ended up working out really well for us because we got to go through a high frequency of iterations at a low cost with the skill set to prototype. Till we got to the point where we had paying customers and our site was breaking every day. And then we got to retool for scale with a team that really knew how to build things in a different manner that could allow us to scale that code. So you learn as
I
you
want to
go.
point that out. That is just such an important lesson, because there's a very different set of skills to building a prototype which you can quickly iterate on, and it's not going to break the system, and see if something works and if it's resonating. It's very different than building on a foundation that can quickly scale up internationally. If something goes off, you're on, I don't even know the terminology anymore, but they're very different skill sets. And I think companies can fail by going the latter too soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if we went for the top talent early, we went through so many. It took us a good year and a half to get in the right direction in terms of what we needed to build for the market. We would have ran out of cash and been gone a long time ago.
Yeah.
So we still do that. If there's projects even now where we're initiating it, we're trying to find the cheapest way to prototype it, prove the model, validate it, and then we'll look at, hey, does this work? Can we actually? And nowadays there's so many no code platforms where you could prototype something that actually scales pretty far
Yeah.
on its own. And then, yeah, then you can get to that point where there's a clear case to rebuild it. We operate our online school. We licensed an LMS system, and it's done well. It's got us to manage hundreds of students on that platform. Now we're shifting to grow through selling enterprise licenses to larger groups,
Yeah.
for corporations. And now we're running into the other challenges of how do you manage all those different seats and corporate accounts. And that's like, okay, do we look at other solutions that are built for this, or do we look at building something? I think that's the thing. I would, if I'm looking at building something new, there's a lot of frameworks out there. There's a lot of these things that you could leverage, those no code platforms, see if you can build prototypes on there. My favorite building companies are always the ones that start an Excel sheet.
Yeah.
They've proved the model. You started a recruiting service, whatever it was, but you sort of did it pure manually.
Yeah.
And got it going, and then just kept reinvesting the capital back into it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's that reminds me of another interview we did with a gentleman, Nick Biak, Helsum. It's a payments company, and his whole thing was, as soon as I had enough cash flow to hire another person, I would. And so that's how he built his company. It was just if he can get one more person, he will. And just kept on reinvesting that way and building the people talent, which has now built up a nice business. And yeah, it's so many different ways to do this. And, you bring it back to your experience of seeing into so many different companies and realizing that they're all so different, even if they're competing in the same space.
Yeah, that was my search for a long time, was what's the perfect business to run. And I realized there's none. They're all got their pros and cons.